Hey everybody! So recently I did a video on the thing with the iPhone XS whereby if you replace the battery, even if you replace that battery with an Apple OEM original, even if you go to the Apple store and buy a new iPhone XS Max, take the battery that's been unused out of that and put it into yours, it will give you this service message in the battery health app when you try to check your battery. And I gave my opinions on that. I think that this is going to create a lot of frustration with consumers and repair shop owners who replace the battery, sometimes with a new OEM battery for their phone, and the consumer's going to say, it says service. Did you actually do anything? It's just going to cause a lot of nonsense and controversy that does not have to exist. And I had a debate with Jessa Jones for about an hour on this very topic. I'm sorry for the potato quality. I'll put a link to it down below, but it is worthwhile. My microphone interface wasn't working. I was speaking with Jessa. I actually didn't know we were going to stream it. She just kind of started streaming in the middle of the phone call, but I think it was a really good back and forth debate, and I'd love your opinions on the content of that debate. That being said, there is another individual who has a YouTube channel, Renee Ritchie. I'm going to link it down below, and he had some fair and balanced points on this as well. I highly suggest that you listen to everything he has to say and hear him out before coming to a conclusion. There's one area on it that I was a little bit confused at. I had pressed Jessa when it came to the safety concern, and Renee brings up the safety concern as well, so I wanted to play what his take was on the matter.
Apple doesn't really care about looking bad in this particular instance. What Apple cares about is the words iPhone and burn. Catastrophic battery failures is what Apple cares about. And if you just can't bring yourself to believe that Apple or any other company really cares about property damage or personal injury, console yourself with this. They absolutely have to care about the legal exposure that comes with it, and will do an awful lot to limit it as much as possible. In the meantime, I'm gonna hard agree with my colleague, Lori Gill. Instead of turning off battery monitoring, which is a hella passive-aggressive move, Apple should just steal a page from MiFi and pop up an annoyer that says pretty much the same thing. Then, each and every time you dismiss it, you get an estimation of battery health anyway, even in another color if they really have to. At least that's aggressive. Ass covered, customer unimpacted.
Now, I completely agree with the concept that there are varying wide degrees of quality available, and there are a lot of vendors that sell garbage. If you go back to about 9 years ago in 2010, at the end of the year, I started a company called Rossman Supply Group. This was about 2 years into my repair business, and the idea was that we were not going to sell you junk. It wasn't going to be like when you order a screen from Bliss Computers or something, and it shows up with 3 or 5 dead pixels, or they sold you a B154PW02 instead of a B154PW01 because they don't know the difference, because they don't want to repair shop, and the screen doesn't work in the A1150 MacBook. It was going to be a company where I sell you the parts that I'm actually using as a service center. So the parts that I use for my own customers. The sales pitch was supposed to be something like a grocery store owner that says, I actually cook food for my own family using fruit and vegetables from my own store, rather than it just being, I just buy stuff and then resell it to you. And that company wound up failing miserably around 2013, 2014. But the point being, I'm very well aware of the fact that there's a wide degree of quality available and that there's no shortage of bad batteries in the market. But there are 2 points here that I wanted to touch on, because the safety issue, again, it does confuse me for a variety of reasons. The first is, if this was genuinely an issue of safety, if safety or batteries exploding was the issue, I don't understand why the phone actually allows any battery to be used that's not Apple at all. To be clear, I agree with everybody who's saying that the use of the word lock is inappropriate here and your standard bullshit media sensationalism, as I mentioned in the Why People Don't Trust Journalists Anymore video about the Henrik Husby case that you can view down here. I'm not a fan of media sensationalism, nor am I a fan of them telling you things that are genuinely not true, that they know to not be true at the time that they're reporting them. At the same time, it does make me wonder, because if this was an actual lock, if it did not allow any other battery to work unless it was installed at the Apple Store, then I could completely understand the argument for safety. I would not say it's an argument I would agree with, but I could at least respect that the intention behind the feature was safety. However, if you're going to allow any Tom, Dick, or Harry to put a battery into the phone, and it will still boot off of that battery, then I don't understand the argument for safety. Let's say that I decide to put some random e-bike battery that's putting out 2 times its rated current after I've already kind of broken the BMS system on it, like this, into a phone. As I don't put those types of things into phones. I care far more about my customer's safety than I do about the safety of my own nutsack. But that being said, what if I would decided to put an effed up battery like that into a customer's phone? With the way the system works, it would actually still work totally fine. It would say service on it, and if that customer decided to ignore what it said when it said service on it, that customer could then take that onto an airplane, and God knows what would happen at that point. But if this was a safety issue, then it would be an actual lock. I don't understand how this would be something that has to do with safety, and the reason that I assume that this is being done to decrease consumer confidence in repair rather than it being done something that's done for safety is because when it comes to safety, you're not actually affecting the safety of the product. If the product didn't work with the third-party battery or the unverified battery, I completely understand it. But it does work with the unverified battery. It just gives you an obnoxious message. The second thing is, when it actually does come to safety with batteries, the ratio of the number of phones out in the wild to the reported cases of them just randomly going poof, no, I just don't accept it. I don't accept that that is something that actually happens on a large enough scale for it to warrant any sort of intrusion into freedom or your ability to work on your own product or any sort of inconvenience in this process. Again, I'm not saying that we should be using bad parts. For the last 9 years, I've been arguing that there are a lot of bad parts vendors, and I would like to shame them whenever possible. What I'm saying is that when we talk about this as a type of safety concern, there's likely more people that have accidentally fell off of the Brooklyn Bridge while taking a selfie than people that have dealt with a phone that just spontaneously blew up. We may see news stories about it, but I want you to really think hard about the number of news stories we've seen reporting this to the actual number of phones that are out there and the number of reports that you've heard for virtually almost anything else. More people likely die as the result of a vending machine falling on them than people that die as a result of a phone battery exploding. What most commonly happens when you have a knockoff battery is A, diminished capacity, or B, failures under load. So if you have a laptop battery which has multiple cells and it's balancing charging and the discharge amongst multiple cells, let's say you have 4 or 5 cells in a laptop battery, and every single one of them is going to have a little bit different tolerance. So maybe one cell will be discharging a little bit more and one cell will be discharging a little bit less so that it balances everything out. The BMS is actually fairly complicated in this regard. Let's say you use some cheap, crappy BMS that just doesn't bother balancing at all. And it says that your battery has 10% left, so you're close to the end. And then you decide to play a game or run Prime 95, and the moment you run Prime 95, your machine just dies. That's actually something that is common when you use a really bad battery with a really basic-ass BMS that doesn't bother checking between the different cells and doesn't bother trying to balance between them and doesn't have good profiles and curves. So it'll say when you have this amount of voltage, say it's 10%, when you have this amount of voltage, say it's 5%, and so on and so forth. That's also a common issue with phones, where if you get a really, really bad knockoff battery installed with a really bad controller, it'll say that it has 15% left. You open up a game, it just dies because once it's asked to draw more current, the controller was overconfident in reporting the percentage, and it told you a percentage that it could not actually sustain when you decided to run something that drew a higher current load. That's very common. But again, when it comes to batteries spontaneously blowing up, third-party batteries, first-party batteries alike, this is not something that is a widespread issue. The only way you're going to get batteries to blow up like that in the real world is if you take a battery that you plugged an Amazon charger into and try to fix the BMS yourself when no parts are available with parts that may or may not be to spec, and then ask the battery put out twice its rated amperage. Which again, this just that nobody's doing that in the mobile phone industry. If anything, I think this is taking a step backwards because many independents now have an incentive to actually learn how to swap out the battery board from the old battery onto the new one, when the old battery was authentic and the new one may not be authentic. So if anything, you are incentivizing independent repair shops to gain the knowledge and the skill set to take all of the authentication stuff from the old battery and put it on the new one. So now you have the new battery lying about its condition or lying about where it came from, which is something that none of us were doing before. None of us were doing it because there was no incentive. Now there is that incentive because I either have to do that or deal with my customer saying, why does my battery say service when you put a new one in my phone? And again, if it didn't say service, I wouldn't care. If it said, I don't know where this battery came from, that's fine. If it said, this is not your original battery, that's fine. I understand that there are people that are going to sell phones and claim that they're in great condition when the battery's got like 1,000 cycles on it. I think it's a good thing for the consumer to be able to tell some history of some of the device. But this is not actually doing that. This is not, you're going the lazy way out. And the reason that I called this lazy engineering in the very beginning is because, as I said, it would not authenticate any original battery put into the device. The battery health app is so bad that if you take a battery from an iPhone that you got from the Apple Store with one cycle and put it in, it will say service. The word service is what I have an issue with here. If you want to say that this is a mystery battery, that's totally fine. Even if you want to have the lazy-ass engineering in there of saying that it's a mystery battery when it's a battery that came out of another iPhone 10. Just don't say service across the board for all of it. The last thing that we have to think about here is, why is it that people are getting so up in arms and doing things I disagree with, like using the word lock when the word lock is inappropriate? It's because it's Apple. This is not a company that has a good history when it comes to these types of things. One of the things I talked about in the 2015 video that I did was how in one of the machines, you used to be able to hit D, run a test, and it would tell you which sensor failed. And then in 2013-14, they decided to make it so that you couldn't run that test. It would just give you an error code that would tell you to go to an Apple store. And then afterwards, you weren't even able to use an Apple tool to run that test. You would have to connect to their own servers, authenticate that you had the right to run this test because you were an Apple certified center, and then you could run the test that would tell you which sensor failed. And those are the very centers that are not allowed to actually do anything once they figured out what sensor has failed, besides replace the entire board that the sensor is on. This is not a company that has a great history when it comes to any of these issues, which is why everybody has such a keen and watchful eye on them when they do things like this. And again, I will disagree with people who are using the word lock. I think that that is in bad faith. I think it's bad to say that this is what they're doing when it's not. I'm simply stating how it's going to affect the consumer. When I say that this is part of a war on independent repair, I'm simply saying, not saying that it's a lock. What I'm doing is pointing out that it's going to make independent repairers look worse. It's going to cause a lot of friction with our customers, and I don't think that that's something that bothers them based on the 10 years that I've been in business, the 10 years that I've had customers come in and tell me the things they've heard at the Genius Bar. And when he makes mention of the fact that some of the features of the newer versions of iOS are supposed to allow them to work better on older phones, I hear what you're saying when you're saying that Apple is one of the few, if not only, companies that actually cares about updating older devices, and I give them that. And many Android is just awful when it comes to having phones that get the latest version of the operating system, even if you buy expensive flagship. But at the same time, that's only one piece of the puzzle when it comes to repairability and longevity. I can't run the newest version of an operating system on a device that doesn't work, and that's what we're getting at here. The reality is that the world that we're moving towards is a world where if I simply want to replace your battery and not deal with a paranoid consumer, that I'm going to have to pay a middleman fee. Not even Apple, but a middleman fee. A little birdie has whispered into my ear, and yes, this is a rumor, that there are programs developing at Apple called the Genuine Parts Program. The Genuine Parts Program is going to allow third parties to be able to have access to parts, and also software that's going to allow you to pair the battery to the phone. But wait, it's not that great just yet, because it's not going to be third parties like Duke from the Netherlands, who was a genius engineer, or people like Jessa or myself that have come up with solutions to many of the problems inherent in Apple's products, not the people that are at the top of their field. It's going to be the McDonald's of our industry. The companies like CPR that, while being very nice people, have in the past outsourced to me jobs as simple as a trackpad cable, a backlight fuse, and a U8900 repair. Nice people, but again, do I really want to live in a world where I need to bend the knee, pay a franchise fee, and then pay a percentage of my annual profits, hard-earned, doing work that they don't know how to do, just to get access to a piece of effing software that they didn't even make? Do I want to tear down my store sign and store logo and my website and replace it with somebody else's brand that knows less than I do, and give them my hard-earned money every year to get access to a tool that Apple made? Not really, but that's the world that we're going to be living in, because I'm not going to be getting access to these parts. Duke at his company is not going to get access to those parts. Jess is not going to get access to these tools, but the McDonald's of our industry will. And that's not a world that I want to live in. To be clear, I know that there are businesses that exist where the people working there are far better than me and no way more than me, and I'm totally okay with businesses existing where the technicians or people working there know less than me. It's important that people start somewhere, and I respect the fact that people have to start somewhere, and they're going to start somewhere where they may know not a lot like I did when I started. But I don't feel like paying a franchising fee to those individuals in order to get access to the basics to do my job. That's where I start to draw the line. I would sooner let a vending machine fall on me before I took my store sign down and replaced it with the logo of a company that needs to outsource a trackpad cable. I would sooner ride that bicycle again and stay on the bicycle rather than jump off when it goes on fire, just so that I don't have a future where I have to explain to my children why it is that I chose to be a sellout and a coward. But that's the world that we're moving towards. And that's not a world that I want to live in. And that's not a world that I think that would be ideal for most of the people who watch this channel to live in either. I love seeing new small businesses run by smart, talented, great technicians emerge in a business where there is a really low barrier and cost to entry, do amazing quality work. I love hearing about the Tim Hermans. I love hearing about the people like the one that I just posted on the community page of this channel that were able to make something from nothing, that did not need to have a 5-figure investment to get started in our business, that also managed to do really great work, a lot better than some of the work done by, again, some of the McDonald's in our field. But that's going to be going away, and I want our industry to have some basic standards of quality. I want our industry to be made up of people that take integrity in their work, that find doing a good job, using good parts to be a source of dignity and pride for themselves, but I also want it to be an industry where this type of stuff is available. Maybe making these parts available so that we can get access to them, that would be a great start. Coming up with backroom deals and agreements so that only certain companies that are not exactly the best at what they do would have access to this stuff, and coming up with applications that make it so that if an independent so much as puts your battery into a customer's phone, it warns them. That doesn't seem like a step in the right direction. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see more and more stores close their doors and reopen as part of a franchise that they now have to pay an annual fee to, just so that they're able to get access to the things that they didn't even need before to begin with. And I don't think that this is great for all of you, nor do I'm somebody who typically does not care about individuals who are wealthy, nor do I really get aggravated at people for being wealthy, but there's the method in which you generate that wealth that is something that I have in my mind. If somebody gets rich providing something that is genuinely valuable and life-changing to me, that's great. I don't feel like helping make somebody else rich just to get access to a tool that would allow a battery to be able to work in a phone when that person, again, I would bet the balls that I almost burned off on it, knows less about the job than I do. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm really curious what you think of what I've had to say, what Renee's had to say. I highly suggest you watch his video and also listen to everything he has to say before you type something in the comments. Be cognizant of the fact that other people are going to have different views than you do, and when you are debating with them, try to keep that in mind when you're having a discussion. Discussion is always what we're looking for, not to just throw darts at each other. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something.